one would actually see what is going on in the media about Manchester United. And the first question you want to ask yourself is it that the media wants Manchester United to fail, or is just that Man United in itself brings them clicks? We talk about things that go on when certain teams win or certain teams lose. But when it comes to Manchester United, it is put under the microscope, scrutiny, players are under scrutiny, and all of that. Just imagine managers just weeks into their 25-26 season, both at legendary clubs, both have demanding fan bases, and both are dealing with high profile pressure. But guess what? One is Rúben Amorim at Manchester United. Like we can talk for one is Rúben Amorim at Manchester United leads his team to a 2-0 victory, a crucial win, and the media headlines immediately frame it not as progress but merely gaining respite. I mean, from scrutiny as well, basically like, oh, one more game to keep him on his job and stuff. He's described as under relentless pressure even after navigating fixtures against Arsenal, against Man City, and against Chelsea in the opening 5 games. The environment is so toxic that the key player, Mason Mount, had to go public just to confirm that the squad is 100% behind the coach. Now, look at the other manager, Arne Slot at Liverpool. He is navigating an immense task of succeeding a club legend, yet the media narrative is consistently protected by the patient language of transition. They focus on new signings, describing players like Giovanni Leone as making a transition or being in a bright prospect, or even Florian Wirtz as well, who has played 7 games without a goal or an assist. I mean, there's no talk of a crisis. All I hear or see online is, oh, they're in a mini crisis, and it happens to every club. The only thing you hear also is strategic adjustments. Oh, these players are in a new system, they're in a transition period, but then this same team spent over, which we'll come to pretty much later, over half a million dollars, £500,000, on players, signing players for different sides. Let's talk this. They signed a new left back, new right back, new central midfielders, 2 strikers, right? They signed 2 strikers, and yet all we hear is, oh, they're in a transition. Meanwhile, Manchester United obviously didn't do so much in the transfer market, and then they signed a whole new front 3, let go of the others, and a new goalkeeper, and boom, oh, the team is under pressure, the manager is out of his depth. They're not talking about transition periods for anything. It's like, oh, he should be starting this player, he should be starting that player. The pressure is really different for both clubs, and the media do it, and then Man United fans actually take on it as well, and it just doesn't help at all, especially for the club and the pressure that is being mounted on these players. Like I said, there's no talk of this. In fact, AI models are already predicting that Liverpool will win the Premier League again. So it's pretty much straightforward. Same report, same sport, same pressure, radically different standards. That's the thing. This is the core of this video, this investigation. The mainstream media operates a calculated, disproportionately critical agenda against Manchester United. And it's not just about clicks. It's not just about results. It's about a deeply entrenched crisis economy that makes negative Manchester United content the most commercially valuable product in the world of football. Now we're going to break it down. We're going to break down how this bias is maintained, from the instantaneous headlines of the past 3 weeks to the historical structural flaws that have fed the narrative for the last decade. In truth, I'll tell you this for a fact. In truth, I've been doing videos about Manchester United mainstream media bias and stuff, and I've been analyzing it. And once the international breaks comes, there's a cycle of news that comes out that is consistent. One is transfer rumors. Oh, Kobe Menu wants out, Joshua Zirkzee wants out. These are the examples of what's been going on in the last 24, 48 hours. Then the other is, oh, the manager is still under pressure, the Liverpool game is on the horizon, blah, 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 blah. That one too pressure on the manager. Then the next one you start to hear is about the other teams, protecting the other teams, this and that. Or you talk the most recent ones as well that I've done, even in a live, is you hear things like, the quarantine, talking about the development and all of that. So I've broken this into different parts. I'm going to start with the first one, the crisis versus comfort blanket, which is kind of like part one of this research. And then when we look at the immediate coverage, the last few weeks of 2025, of the 2025 season, the narrative asymmetry is very glaring. The media employs two completely separate lexicons when discussing managerial struggles. For Manchester United under Rúben Amorim, the default setting is institutional failure. The microscope is pointing relentlessly at Old Trafford. After that 2-0 victory against Sunderland, not only was the positive result minimized as a mere respite, you hear things like it's only Sunderland, yet they call Sunderland high-flying Sunderland, and then they say, oh, it's only Sunderland. But the focus immediately shifted to the next challenge, winning consecutive games for the first time. That is what I brought you news since the day Man United won. They're now talking about winning consecutive games for the first time. The low threshold for failure and the constant need for public reassurance, like Mason Mount's declaration, immediately reinforces outside perception that the club is fundamentally unstable. You talk about, there's this news that came out that Omar Berada and Jason Wilcox had conversations with the leadership group and players in the team to find out if they're fully backing the manager, and they all said they're backing the manager and it's a positive thing out there. That is no news, but because it involves Manchester United, everything is news. Every step forward is immediately downgraded to a pause in the inevitable collapse. That is the fact. And whether we like it or not, that's what they've been doing. And that's what has been causing the divide in the Manchester United fan base. Contrast this with the institutional trust that is afforded to Liverpool and Arne Slot. Before we get there, I saw a video online where I think Sky Sports was previewing the Manchester United versus Sunderland game, talking about the different pressures of both managers between Man United and Liverpool. And the Man United fan couldn't even choose a side. The Liverpool, and obviously Sky Sports strategically didn't post the Liverpool side of the conversation, but the Man United fan couldn't choose a side, talking about the game ahead, and the Liverpool fan comes in and throws a jab and say, this manager is sinking your club to oblivion. Check the table. We're 4 points behind them, or 5 points behind them. Yet the manager is sinking the club to oblivion. Yet, right? And then obviously the Manchester United fan couldn't even choose a side. It was so funny to watch, but it is what it is, because obviously they're going to push whatever they want to push, and Sky Sports strategically posted that, right, so that it can get clicks and stuff. But it is what it is. And then obviously if you contrast it to this with institutional trust afforded to Liverpool and Arne Slot, even when results aren't perfect, the conversation remains a high level, focused and strategic planning and future dividends. The club is perceived as competent, giving the manager a media buffer that simply does not exist for Rúben Amorim, right? Now, the truth is, if we're going to talk about it, it's a lot. There's so many players that are underperforming at Liverpool. Mo Salah, top player, underperforming. Florian Wirtz, Konate, Van Dijk, Kerkers, even Jeremy Frimpong, Florian Wirtz. The only players that are performing in the games that I've watched Liverpool, because I deliberately watch Liverpool, to see, so that I can have points, right, is Szoboszlai. He scored more goals than Wirtz and all of them in the midfield. In that midfield, even Jones does better in that midfield. McAllister did well against Chelsea, even though I was watching both teams, right? But yeah, they're covered. There's a team in transition. They have a flurry of injuries. Look at Isaiah Isak, 4 games, no goals, no assists, nothing. What about what's his name? The only another very much performing player that has done well, but eventually the last couple of games hasn't scored, maybe because he's coming from bench and stuff, is Hugo Ekitike, the better player of all players that have been signed. Kokesh struggled, not even having the trust of the manager. uh, Jeremy Frimpong as well, being put on the bench for a player like Dominic Soboslai to play as right back, as a midfielder. But Soboslai has been played out of position. Nobody's talking about it, but the whole media talks about how Man United manager plays players out of position. Now, the part two of this is just the financial hypocrisy of everything that goes on. The financial reporting exposes the media's double standards most aggressively. When Manchester United spends money, the press acts like the club is draining the world economy. They throw in inflated figures, converting currencies to make expenditures and sound worse, and including potential add-ons as if they are already fully, they are already fully realized costs. The goal simply is to amplify the perception of the financial mismanagement. You talk about the most recent player that was signed by Manchester United for next year, that was going to join the club next year, and 477,000 pounds was spent to acquire that player, and they amplified it, and they kept saying it's $1 million, $1 million. And when you see it as $1 million, you're shocked, like, oh, $1 million, that's a lot of money. But it's actually 400. How much did they spend to sign the player? 477 or 471 thousand pounds. And that's what they called, it's $1 million. But they dominated the headlines. It's a good player, a young 17-year-old. Yeah, boom, dominated the headlines. So that's it. That's the question. They add all these things, add the add-ons to inflate the figures. Or a player that was signed for 75 million. You check it out. It's actually 68 because they count it out in euros. Or 64 million, 64.5, 62.5 million for Matos Cunha and stuff like that. They amplify these figures. But here's the kicker. The data gives them a hook. According to the Premier League net spend versus results table, Manchester United ranks as the second worst club for transfer efficiency, a clear indication of a poor return on investment, with a 5-year net spend calculated at approximately negative £679 million. The analysis explicitly confirms this enormous investment hasn't equated to success. Specific high-profile transfers include Anthony, Rasmus Højlund, Jadon Sancho. These are instantly cited as examples of wasted investment. But what about the rivals? With Chelsea, who themselves rank fourth worst in the same efficiency table, spend money like they have a money printing machine. The media often affords them a degree of cover. Their outlay is often framed as strategic investment. Similarly, when Manchester City buys an expensive squad player, it's simply categorized as building squad depth, devoid of the moralizing tone applied to the identical financial outlays at Old Trafford. When United sells a player, the narrative is often one of realism. Take a low fee, be realistic. But when the player from a rival leaves for big money, it's celebrated as smart business when done. The microscope is only pointed at Old Trafford when it's convenient for clicks. You think about players that have left the club and gone on to do good things. They say, if you want to, I saw one today, if you want your career to pick up, leave Manchester United. Focusing on Rasmus Højlund, who went to Napoli and has scored a couple of goals in the last couple of games. Nobody's talking about the games they lost, especially the one they lost to AC Milan and the stuff. Okay, what about what's his name? Marcus Rashford. They said, he got the man of the match for the game between Barcelona and Sevilla. But yet, they lost 4-1. 4-1. How can you lose 4-1 and still become the man of the match? Think about it. And he was not even the top performing team. In the rating, he got 7.0. The top performing team was Gavi, the top performing player was Gavi, 7.2. The rest were below 6. And Rashford got man of the match. And they say, if you want to kickstart your career, go to leave Manchester United. Hello, Jadon Sancho at Aston Villa, nobody has heard his name or seen anything with regards to his move. What about Andre Onana, who has left for Trabzonspor? He has kept 2 clean sheets, no doubt. But guess what? He's considered so many goals already in the last couple of games that he played since he joined Trabzonspor. But nobody's talking about that. Everybody's focusing on, you want to build your career, you want your career to kickstart again if you're having trouble at Manchester United. you leave Manchester United and go to other clubs and flourish. Guess what? They put the pressure and they turn up the pressure at Old Trafford, turn up the pressure at Manchester United, where these players will struggle to thrive or bend under pressure. And by the time the players leave, that pressure is no longer there, and then they end up, doing better. Or, I mean, look at Anthony leaving Manchester United, going to Real Betis and saying, "Oh, Man United disrespected him." The pressure is too much. You can't handle the pressure. And also, the ex-players and pundits don't help the matter as well. Right? So like I said, the microscope is only pointed at Old Trafford when it's convenient for clicks. Now to part 3, the Glazer Tax, a decade of crisis fuel, right? Now, to understand why this bias is so easily sustained, we have to look back 10 years, to the structural flaws that provided the media with continuous ammunition regardless of the manager. The number one structural inhibitor is and always has been the Glazer ownership model. The Glazer family leveraged buyouts in 2005 saddled the club, this is around 20 years ago, saddled the club with enormous debt, right? Saddled the club with enormous debt. This financial toxicity is the gift that keeps giving for crisis reporters. Over the past 2 decades, this debt, along with associated fees and monies extracted directly from the club, has cost Manchester United well over £1 billion. That figure, the Glazer tax, is a permanent systemic grievance. It allows every journalist and pundit to connect any on-pitch failure, no matter how small, to the fundamental financial extraction by the ownership. The debt functions as a perpetual narrative amplifier for any negative event, framing United's spending as inherently wasteful compared to the rivals who reinvest their profits. And that's facts. But the truth is, we're not going to shy away from the fact that the Glazers have not really done well in helping the club with regards to the financing and the model of football. But Ineos have taken over, right? Furthermore, Sir Alex Ferguson retired in 2013, and the club failed spectacularly in succession planning, effectively losing its heart and brain at the same time. Since then, the club has, churned through 5 permanent managers, collecting only 4 major trophies and failing to win the league again. Now, this decade of structural chaos, provides continuous, readily available material, right, for crisis reporting, making it incredibly simple for the media to generalize a short-term mistake into a systemic total collapse. Now, if you look at it, yes, we're not denying the fact that the Glazers had their issues. We're not denying the fact that the Glazers have ruined the club at some point. But we have to also look at it from the perspective of the fact that everything is going to be amplified. Everything is going to be amplified, which takes us to part 4 of this whole research, the commercial mandate and the reality show, basically. Now, the most powerful driver, of the negative agenda is strictly commercial. Manchester United's massive global brand, trying to get my words out. Manchester United's massive global brand value is, the engine that guarantees audience engagement regardless of whether the story is positive or negative. And I'll tell you, even if Manchester United relegates to the championship today, we'll still dominate the headlines and we'll still be a big club, because the truth is, anything that happens at Manchester United generates clicks, right? You think about Manchester United's possessing an exceptional stable brand profile. It is calculated as having one of the strongest brands in global football, boasting an AAA, that's triple A plus rating. Now, the strength translates into vast commercial revenue streams globally, including sponsorship, merchandise, and broadcasting through channels like ManU TV in over 56 countries. This immense reach creates what we call the global engagement trap. Because the audience is so vast, negative stories, those involving crisis, failure, and managerial meltdowns are guaranteed to generate maximum clicks, views, and social media shares. The commercial imperative for media platforms dictates the high engagement content, which must be prioritized. High engagement content must be prioritized. That's what the media platforms will create, especially for commercial imperatives. The media isn't just reporting on the crisis; it's actively creating and perpetuating the drama, because the commercial return on investment for Manchester United, for Man United crisis coverage is simply higher than for any objective analysis of rivals. As some experts have noted, the intense scrutiny means Manchester United is often functioning more a reality show influencer than a properly functioning football club. So no matter what you do, it's never going to be right or positive for them. Which takes us to part 5 and the final part of this whole research. To maintain the United crisis agenda, the media must also construct narrative shields around rival clubs during their own periods of difficulty. Consider Arsenal under Mikel Arteta. His project was protected by the concept of the process. Yeah, which afforded him a prolonged public grace period to endure significant spells of poor results without immediate calls for his dismissal. This framing allowed the club to project a unified long-term philosophical strategy, effectively insulating the manager from the short-term result-driven panic that immediately affected or afflicted Rúben Amorim. You think about Arsenal's first season where he took over from Unai Emery, where Arteta took over from Unai Emery. Nobody's talking about the fact that they're going to their 7th year without winning a single trophy or getting to a single final. Since the FA Cup triumph that they won with Unai Emery's team when Arteta joined in December, they're going to 7 years without a single trophy and without a single final. Think about it. But nobody's calling for his head. They're calling it the process. They're saying trust the process. They're hailing him as one philosophical genius or whatever. Now, when we look at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp in 2015, his early struggles were handled with analytical patience. The media focused on the tactical evolution, the pressing, the formation changes, the key player roles, rather than the institutional collapse. This established a precedent for objective patience during post-legend transitions, a precedent that is conveniently ignored when Amorim takes the stage. And next thing you hear, they brand Amorim as one who talks a lot. Case in point, Simon Jordan. But the truth is, you expect him to answer questions when asked in the press, when asked in the media. He's expected to answer questions. He's expected to be honest. He's expected to be long-standing. He's expected to be in good standing as well when he talks as well in the media. You think about, Jamie Carragher coming out on the overlap and saying stuff like, "Oh, the only reason why he's in the job is because of how fine he looks, how good he looks, and how well he speaks in the media, and his hair and all of that." What does good looks have to do with having being a good manager? Meanwhile, he was the next best thing, and Liverpool were interested until they went for Arne Slot, and Arne Slot took Jurgen Klopp's team to win the Premier League the next season, a team that had reached its peak already with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson and the likes being good at least for 3 years in a row. And then he came at the 3rd year when Jurgen Klopp did not win the league or did not win the quadruple. He came at the 3rd year and took that team to the next level by winning the trophy. And after that, when it came to applying his own principles, that is Arne Slot, he has not won 3 games he has not won in the last 3 games, and nobody's putting the pressure cooker on and tightening it up for Liverpool. Even when discussing Manchester City, there are issues like the complex financial fair play charges, the 115, which seems to now tire out, and we're expecting a result by this month, October. It tends to be highly technical and very compartmentalized. This is actually complex reporting. Media outlets often prefer the generalized emotional, viable drama of the Glazer Tax over financial complex reporting on the FFP or even the geopolitical ownership structures. Nobody's talking about all of that. Nobody's talking about how they get the money and all of those things. So the relentless focus on emotional, dramatic content is also fed by punditry. We will not we'll not forget that. We think about, even when we go back to Chelsea, how they've been spending, and how do I say this? Okay, so they've been spending and trying out multiple transfers. trying and failing, trying and failing, trying and failing, and then eventually when they sell these players, eventually like they sign, let's say for example in a transfer window, for example, they'll sign like 20 players, and and in a year or two they sell off 10, and they say, oh, business model, they sign these players for cheap, sell them for more, and all of that, or send them to their sister club in Strasbourg and all of that, and be like, oh, what a transfer fee, oh, it's so good, blah 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 blah, they're doing well, they're making money for the club and stuff. Or even selling the women's team to themselves, right? Selling the women's team to themselves. They did it, and Aston Villa followed suit as well, just so that they can bypass it and make profit and all of that. We've done this deep dives like into details before in the past, so you can tell that obviously the media spin is crazy when it comes to Manchester United, right? So, like I said, this is complex reporting because they've compartmentalized it. The media outlets often prefer the generalized emotional variable drama of the Glazer Tax over technically complex reporting on the FFP or geopolitical ownership structures of these clubs like Chelsea, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester City. Now, the relentless focus on emotional dramatic content is also fed by punditry. Ex-players of Manchester United are all over the media. Or are we talking about Peter Schmeichel, Gary Neville, Paul Scholes, Owen Hargreaves, Rio Ferdinand? They're all over the media, right? You can hardly see multiple ex-Liverpool players as pundits. Very few, if you want to mention names. There's Jamie Carragher, who leads the way in all of that talks every day. You talk about even Graham Souness, right? The rest are just maybe on match days you see them 1-1 and all that. But the rest, like Jamie Carragher, who features on the overlap with Gary Neville and co, and Ian Wright for Arsenal as well. Then you have Roy Keane for Man United, Wayne Rooney, Gary Neville. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. But they're all over the social media, and they have to speak so that they can generate clicks. I won't lie to you. That is what happens, basically. The relentless focus on emotional, dramatic content is fed by punditry, which increasingly blends journalism with entertainment. Analysts engage in showy partisanship, often focusing the camera on a crying child in the crowd during the defeat. Yeah. And one amazing thing about that little kid that was crying in the crowd, I've seen a video from 3 seasons ago, and that child seems to be in that same spot. To be a Man United fan is not easy. He seems to be in that same seat and all of that. And it's so amazing to see that the child is dedicated to watching Manchester United, from time. I've seen that same child on different screens and all of that. The high drama, the high emotional content drives that the high drama and the high emotional content drives the necessary engagement for modern sports broadcasting, and Manchester United, as the club perceived to be the most structurally flawed, becomes the prime subject for this emotional scapegoating, which fans tend to take and lap up. The fact is, like I said, I've been saying this in my content, in any content I've produced. Manchester United fans have developed a culture of scapegoating, and they will look for the next person to make a scapegoat. Now, this analysis confirms it. And that is basically the question: what's the way forward to wrap this all up? This analysis confirms it. The mainstream media operates a disproportionately negative, crisis-driven agenda against Manchester United. The favorable framing of Arne Slot as a manager in transition versus the immediate crisis framing of Rúben Amorim in 2025 is not an anomaly. It's the market operating as intended. The market operating as intended. The crisis is structurally fed by the Glazer Tax, the £1 billion of debt, the billion pounds of debt, and the commercially fueled by United's own spectacular world-class, world-leading brand strength. Until the structural issues are solved, until the debt narrative is removed and the club demonstrates clinical, demonstrable competence in the transfer market, the media will continue to profit from the drama. For Manchester United to change this narrative, they must eliminate the structural hooks that the media relies on. They need to replace the narrative of wasted investment with a narrative of operational competence, which I think Omar Berrada and Jason Wilcox are trying to do, forcing the conversation away from emotional crisis and back toward the objective football analysis. So, like I said, the media bias always continues. The media bias is always prevalent when it comes to Manchester United. So, it is what it is. We have to keep building. We have to keep, we have to keep being consistent, because the truth is, like I said, the truth will always be the truth, but they will spin it however they please. Manchester United beat Chelsea recently, and what was the media spin? Oh, they beat 10-man Chelsea. Meanwhile, you forget the fact that when Chelsea were 10 men, Man United also went down to 10 men, and Chelsea got a goal back, and they never talked about Manchester United being 10 men. It's when you now read the article and read it down, it's at the bottom, you now see, oh, Casemiro got a red card or 2 yellow cards. That is a red card between the goal and the halftime or something. So think about it. It's crazy. The media pushes whatever they want to spin, and it's all up to you to take it however you please. But we as Manchester United fans are supposed to be very rational about the way we see things. That's why Rúben Amorim cannot get away from this pressure. Mark my words, he cannot get away from. If you like, let's win 3, 4, 5 games on the spin. Can't get away from this pressure. The next thing you hear is his scraping wins. Meanwhile, Liverpool have been scraping wins for the last 9 games. Scraping wins. In 9 games, they've scraped 5 in the Premier League and lost 3, the last 3. Both Premier League and Champions League, because they've been scraping wins, last minute winners. What about the young player that scored the last minute winner? He's on the bench. What about Federico Chiesa that is always coming on to rescue Liverpool? He's always on the bench. He never gets a start, not even registered in the Champions League squad, but nobody's talking about that. So yeah, it's a whole lot. So thank you so much for watching. We'll keep doing deep dives like this, but it's because whenever the international break comes around, there's a whole lot of narrative being pushed. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks so much for liking, sharing, and subscribing. If you haven't already, please do like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't have to miss anything as relates to Manchester United. I'll see you on the next one. Take care, goodbye, and God bless.